Hello, hello. So yesterday I did a video that was meant to bring us up to speed with where we were at post the eclipses that we've had in January. Well, technically we had an eclipse on Christmas Day 2019 and then a lunar eclipse over a week ago on January the 10th of 2020. And in that video, I stated and outlined that the bulk of planetary activity right now is contained within 4 consecutive signs: Sagittarius, where we have Mars; Capricorn, where we have Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto; Aquarius, where we have the Sun and Mercury; and Pisces, where we have Venus. So clearly, the eclipse axis of Capricorn and Cancer has seen the greatest intensity so far over the past couple of months. I would say certainly since Christmas time. And that is where, in previous videos as I've done them, I've kind of described the forest fire burning, or this standoff, certainly with the lunar eclipse on January the 10th, between conservative forces where there might be an element of poor thinking, or I don't know whether power play, or the poor thinking, let's just call it that. And on January the 10th, with the moon in Cancer, this kind of glorious full moon coming in and standing off opposite what I will call a certain amount of madness and craziness. Now the moon has moved on, and the full moon is over and behind us, even though it was an eclipse. And I'm afraid the good news is that the planetary configuration in Capricorn is starting to ease up after the much discussed Saturn-Pluto conjunction and the conjunction around the full moon lunar eclipse on January the 10th of the Sun, Mercury, Ceres, Saturn, and Pluto together within 2 or 3 degrees of each other. At least that intensity and craziness. As the Sun moves on, and it's moved on into Aquarius now, and as Mercury moves on and forward, as the planets get further from the Sun, they start to regain some of their power, and they start to exercise more of their strength. Not everything that occurred during the eclipses, as a recap, was negative. Some of you could have received or taken steps or actions related to communication or education that were positive, and a culmination of sorts that had to do with a certain degree of emotional truth, standing up to constricting or conservative or power dynamic type forces. The absence of intelligence has more to do with the planetary forces in Capricorn than they do in Cancer. So when it comes to the emotional bubble bursting, whether it is a pause button in the escalation of what I'll call the Iran-US conflict that occurred around the time of the eclipse, with everybody, with the moon coming in going, everybody down, this is stupid, or whether it is whatever occurred in Britain with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and the royal family, sort of, one might say that sort of this heart-centered enough is enough to more wherever you fall, if we have to take sides, or even to some extent the growing intensity of conservative forces in India, with the full moon, with there being a bit of a pause or a bit of a reprieve or a bit of a limelight shown towards more with the sign of Cancer, towards elemental feeling and emotion of what is really right here. What are we doing? As I said, the moon has moved on, and the forces in Capricorn are there, and indeed are powerful for the next 6 months or so. But that particular escalation and rockiness, hopefully we will see continue to dissipate. In the middle of all of this, the sign of Sagittarius, as I've mentioned also before, the signs of Capricorn and Pisces will see a certain amount of intensity. Capricorn is already seeing it. Pisces has had the first planet, Venus, move into it, but soon Mercury will move there, and on February the 17th, Mercury will go retrograde. And while it is retrograde, we'll have a new moon in Pisces at the end of February, and other planets will gradually move in there too. So Capricorn, and soon enough Pisces, will start to see energy that is more unusually intense than what I would call normal, run-of-the-mill annual transits, even if they're not annual. Venus and Mars aren't strictly annual transits. But the signs of Sagittarius and Aquarius now starting to see more and more activity with the sun there and Mercury there, and preparing for a new moon on the 24th of January in a few days' time, provide more run-of-the-mill sort of annual review type of events that might be a welcome distraction and might bring a positive forward movement within energies that require introspection, release, hard work, discipline, and a need to slow down and go over things with Mercury retrograde. So Sagittarius and Aquarius may provide pockets of wherever they sit in your chart and whatever they are associated with in your chart. And please remember, I'm a Western astrologer, so I'm looking at a Western tropical zodiac. And I cut my charts using whole signs, WHOLE. So for astrology aficionados, if you look at your chart online, I'm a Western tropical astrologer, Western astrologer, so I do not use a sidereal zodiac. So if you follow Jyotish, your signs may be off by one than what it is that I'm saying with regard to the signs. And the dates of when the planets enter the signs are different. So just know what I am following, so that when you're looking at your chart and I'm talking about Sagittarius and Aquarius and where they sit in your chart, or Cancer or Capricorn or Pisces, you look at a Western chart, because that is what my videos will coincide with. And when I cut charts for people who go online and get their free Western charts or whatever, I use the whole sign systems, WHOLE. And that is similar to Jyotish in that one sign occupies one house. We do not have signs split between houses. I'm not going to get into an argument of what is the right way and what is the wrong way here. So wherever Sagittarius and Aquarius are, stand to provide us with a certain amount of support as the signs of Capricorn and Pisces exhibit the need for slow and meticulous action. Sagittarius has had planets move into it, and Sagittarius season, when the sun is in Sagittarius, is typically between November the 22nd and December the 22nd. And sometime, during this time, we had Mercury in here. We had let's just say that we had news. Mars came into Sagittarius on January the 3rd. And that's what this particular video is about, and is going to be in Sagittarius till February the 16th. And it could be Mars's presence anywhere means that wherever Mars is, you can't ignore it. I mean, Sagittarius and Aquarius may be lighter in intensity, but where Mars is where a lot of our energy and our work and our action is occurring. So you may be pondering, dealing with, sideswiped by, shocked by, have the ground shaking under your feet wherever Capricorn is, and you may be processing it, dealing with it, trying to get into action around it, and you will get into action around it. By all means, be in action around it, but don't be surprised if you find that you're truly in action around it when Mars leaves Sagittarius and goes into Capricorn on February the 16th, February the 17th, and is there till the end of March. So you will have the ability to catch up and take action on whatever the Capricorn eclipse has been bringing to you, starting December the 25th of 2019. However, wherever Mars is takes up a fair amount of our energy and our activity and our action, and it is in Sagittarius. So take a look at where Sagittarius is in your chart and what house it's in and what that stands for, and I would not be surprised if a fair amount of your energy is going in that direction. In addition, it's possible, sorry about the helicopter, we are in Los Angeles. In addition, it's likely that whatever it is that you're taking action on in the sign of Sagittarius was communicated to you in December and was being set up at the end of November and December. So end of November to the end of December, things may have been brought to you, emails, opportunities, things that you know you need to act on, work that you need to do, tasks that you need to do. Things are getting lined up, an agenda is being set. And after January the 3rd until February the 17th, a lot of your drive, the male drive, remember Mars has that arrow, the symbol of Mars has that arrow. A lot of where you're shooting your arrows is going to be wherever the sign of Sagittarius is. I like planets to not be in signs where they are debilitated or fallen or not in their strength. That goes without saying. I also, by and large, prefer planets to not necessarily be in a sign of their strength. And Mars is strong in Scorpio. the sign prior to Sagittarius, and Mars is strong in Capricorn, the sign after Sagittarius. When I look at the sign of Mars in Sagittarius, it being a fiery sign and being a masculine sign, Mars is fine. I almost prefer having Mars there than I do in Scorpio, where the energy can be necessarily and helpful, but sometimes a little bit short-tempered and a little bit vindictive, in a less developed sense. And certainly Mars in Capricorn, which I will get to on February the 16th, exhibits a coldness in execution that, when planets are strong, they will get you through just about anything. But it also means that they will do a number on you. If you have Mercury in Virgo in your birth chart, or you have Mercury in Gemini in your birth chart, or if you have Venus in Pisces or Venus in Taurus, they do create challenges. They do create problems. It's almost like something goes in overdrive. It's a strength that is helpful and powerful, but it can almost become also a detriment, and it can get in the way of your day-to-day execution on things. It's almost like dealing with someone who has overdeveloped muscles in certain areas. The area that it most impacts is your day-to-day life. So if you have Mercury in Virgo, your mind and your ability to analyze and plan and execute will get you through a lot. But people who are interacting with you, for example, or in your day-to-day life, it may create challenges and problems as well. If you have Mars in Aries, for example, it will get you through just about anything because it will give you a tremendous amount of power and strength. But at the same time, there's no question that you're going to have to watch your rashness, your temper, and your libido. So an overdeveloped or an overstrong planet can have its challenges. With Mars in Sagittarius, I kind of think of Mars in Sagittarius as having a degree of exuberance. The only thing that is frustrating to Mars in Sagittarius is Sagittarius' tendency and need and desire to philosophize. And it may be that whatever Mars is asking you to do or giving you the energy to do requires a certain amount of Sagittarian remove. Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and many Sagittarians tend to be social in nature, or at least talkative. There's a communication and a wisdom and a knowledge and an information element to Sagittarius that cannot be ignored. But the sign of Sagittarius is fundamentally a spiritual, removed, intuitive sign. Now, I know people with a Sagittarius ascendant or a sun in Sagittarius that are pretty social by nature, but I also know that they might have Venus in their third house, and therefore may require a lot of interaction with their relatives, or Venus in their 11th house, and so friends and social circles become really important, or they have a moon in Gemini, So there are other planetary placements that account for their garrulousness or their social nature. But the sign of Sagittarius in and of itself requires a connection with our goals and our truth and our essence, and requires the ability to tune into and listen to the higher mind and spirit and intuition, and requires a certain amount of spiritual remove. So it could be that with Mars in Sagittarius, whatever is being asked of you in terms of its execution has two kinds of components to it. One, in order to execute it, you need a certain amount of time to yourself, either to prepare. Let's say you have a job interview, or it's bringing you something along those lines, or you have to deal with something spiritual, or even if you have Mars in the 12th and you're having to deal with some sort of conspiracy, or some people who are acting against you, or some kind of office politics or something along those lines, it requires an element of tuning into spirit and being away from the fray in order to take the action that you need to take, in order to execute properly, in order to prepare to shoot the arrows, if we were to take Mars's iconography further, in an appropriate way. And then the second part of it is that because the sign of Sagittarius is so closely attuned to our goals and our truth, there is this question of how do we land the penny in the slot, or how do we get that, how do we get the billiard ball into the hole? How do we get that arrow to hit that bullseye? Wherever Sagittarius is in your chart and Mars is in your chart, the general interpretation I would say is that it could be a source of joy and pleasure. The activity could be distracting you, keeping you from giving you a pleasant relief from wherever it is in Capricorn that the forest fire is burning, or wherever it is in Pisces that another minor forest fire is starting. Sorry with the fire analogies for people who are in areas where that's not the best analogy, but it is the most appropriate thing I can think of. So wherever Sagittarius is does give you a joyful, for the most part, a joyful release in activities that in the middle of everything could be welcome. And as I said, they could have or require a sense of remove in terms of preparation, a sense of remove in terms of execution, even if they have a social quality, and a connection with your goals and your truth, and a meditation on how to harness and channel that energy to achieve those certain goals. Again, to start to wrap this up, they could be related to things that were lined up or set up in terms of communication even in December, and then the holidays happened, and then January came along and it was like, all right, all systems go. Let's have those meetings. Let's keep those appointments. Let's take care of what needs to be taken care of. The idea of Mars in Sagittarius bringing a certain amount of welcome exuberance with the characteristics that I mentioned, and with perhaps the frustration, the need with Mars in Sagittarius is to be careful not to get too philosophical or retiring about things. It is a call to Mars does want the energy, it does want the activity, it does want the action. So, other ways in which this could be, channeled is things like sports and hiking and activity, something that Sagittarius certainly takes to often, not always, but often. It's associated with Sagittarius, or I question that to some extent, but that could be a welcome way for people who are inclined to channel Mars's energy. Wherever Mars is can also bring arguments and conflict and cuts and surgeries and bleeding and blood-related issues. So wherever Sagittarius is in your chart, take a look at that. Be careful. Accidents, rashness, conflict, as I said, assertiveness turning into aggression, especially due to a great deal of haste. There's a need to steady oneself, but with Mars in Sagittarius, because Mars is not overly strong, maybe some of the Sagittarius philosophicalness can also be a bit of a help. We're going to start to see this energy dissipate as we head into February. The closer a planet gets to the next sign, the more it starts to influence that next sign, particularly when it's about 5 degrees prior to entering Capricorn. So by the time we get to about February the 5th or the 10th, I have a feeling we're going to start to feel Mars ramp up and get ready to go into Capricorn and tackle and deal with the eclipse-related, start to deal with the forest fire. But in the meantime, I did want to acknowledge and point you to the nature of Mars in Sagittarius, point you to where Sagittarius is in your chart, and just observe whether some of your activities are occurring there. One more thing. These are general descriptions based on planets and signs. The houses are really where it is that the activity is taking place. So I may say that Mars in Sagittarius, and I may use the word joy or exuberance around it. But at the end of the day, as I've mentioned in my last video, if you're a Capricorn ascendant, Sagittarius is your 12th house, you could be dealing, or Mars is in the 6th house, if Mars is in the 8th house, if Mars is in a part of a chart that carries a more trying or challenging connotation, or affecting in a part of your chart that has to do with legal affairs, or it has to do with spirituality, or as I mentioned, conspiracies, or it has to do with health, then the nature of what is brought forth has more to do with Mars's presence there. You will be putting your energy there, but what you may be dealing with may not necessarily be joyful. So where a planet, which house it is in, is more important than the characterization that I might be putting forth in one of these general planets and signs videos. That said, for some people with a Capricorn ascendant, it could very well be that Mars in the 12th is giving them the energy they need to tackle things that have been hidden or somewhat conspiratorial. It could still have an element of joy or exuberance in the way that things can be tackled, although Mars in the 12th can also mean that your energy is kind of sapped and robbed. So, I'm starting to now go into what I would call more individual sort of chart analysis, and I think it's best for me to stop that. But I'll stand by my description, but I will state that the house where a planet is transiting is more significant and more important than the sign it is transiting. So, folks, look at your chart from a Western tropical perspective. If you want to look at it from a whole signs perspective, WHOLE, most charts online tend to be placidus. You'll see it, and there may be a drop down wherever you're creating the sign that where you select whole signs, irrespective. However you want to cut your chart. Wherever Sagittarius is where Mars is. And in the middle of all the intensity that we've been dealing with, I would not be surprised if there was some communication, some agenda, something lined up for you in December that requires to be in execution, ideally joyful, exuberant, individual, somewhat introverted execution in a way that is a welcome release and a welcome distraction from all the intensity that is currently in play. I will do more videos about other transits. If you enjoyed this, like this, found it useful, feel free to share it, like it, comment on it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button to find out when I'm doing more videos, and my contact information is in the description area should you want to inquire about rates for readings or me making you an easy to read version of your chart. That's it. Do take this last video that I did before this was, I think, pretty good and pretty useful. I liked it. So do take a look at it to get a sense of the broader sense of where we're at right now. That would be the picking up the pieces video I did yesterday. All right, thank you very much.